Brad, you got to help out your friend Dave, Brad, because I'm in a real bucket of syrup over here, Brad. I'm in a real bucket of syrup.
Listen, I'm here for you. We can solve this problem. Just let me know what it is.
Okay, so the San Diego Comic Book Convention, the arguably the most important comic convention in America, is starting on July 24th, Brad, on a Wednesday, July 24th.
Yeah.
I will be loading up my van that morning, actually the day before, driving down at 7 a.m., unloading, getting the whole booth set up so that by 5 p.m. on Wednesday night, my booth is open and the sales are bonkers. But Brad, here is my pickle. Keep that date in mind, July 24th. That's when the show opens. 120 miles away from there, Brad, on that same day, pallets of my Pickles books are arriving from the printer in Los Angeles, Brad.
Oh, no. Wait a minute. Hold on. I was kidding around when I said I could solve your problems.
Okay.
I think you know how Steven sent you those advance copies?
Yes.
What if he sent you 2 boxes in advance and you just paid, whatever it was? You just took it on the chin for 2 boxes, but he could put 2 boxes on DHL for you today and get them down here.
Okay, yes, except you're not considering international DHL rates for a 30-pound box, and I would need, I mean, given Comic-Con sales last year, I would need about 5 of those boxes shipped internationally via DHL. That would be ruinous, right?
Yeah,
so,
because it's heavier than those few books that he said. Like I'm accepting shipment for tomorrow for the Safe for Work version of my book.
Yeah.
And it's just one. He's just sending 3 books. So, it's not a big deal
on a flat rate package. That kind of thing. Yeah, it's not the same as shipping.
Factored.
It's not the same as shipping like 5 boxes. I cut you off twice. Sorry about that. Shipping 5 boxes internationally by DHL.
Yeah.
So I love that thinking. It's just.
But no, you can't.
I have. It's a weird pickle. I think what's going to have to happen is I'm going to have to go down to San Diego with the loaded van, set up the booth, and leave my wonderful assistant Beth in Los Angeles. She'll take receipt of the pallets of books and then drive down later that day or the next day. Or I can maybe try to do something that's anathema to Brad, maybe tip the trucking drivers to come early and see if they could come early. I mean, listen, I know tipping is just not is de rigueur off the table for Brad, but I might try that strategy. I don't know.
By the way, that story may be back in when ComicLab was still in single-digit or double-digit episode numbers. that goes way back.
That's a callback, yeah. Anyway, it's just what a pickle to have planned this months in advance, both events, and then to have them both land on the same damn day, Brad, the same damn day.
And preview night, like as you've explained to me before, is bonkers for sales.
Oh,
and
bonkers.
You want to have that book out on the table. And it is beyond your control.
Yeah.
Like, it could be that book, that shipment shows up a week early.
Yeah.
Or it could show up in August. Because it could get stuck in customs.
I did the math and I sort of forecasted out different stages of the shipping and trucking process. And the truck could arrive, like you said, a week earlier if everything lines up right. Or I've had this happen. It could arrive 7 to 10 days later. I've had that happen, especially during the pandemic. It could arrive 7 to 10 days later. So there is no guarantee this is going to work. Listen, Comic-Con will be fine. I have 6 new pins. Those sell like gangbusters at Comic-Con. I have the dinosaur book from last year. That will still sell well. Because, as you know, not everybody comes to every Comic-Con. So a lot of people, readers, skip a show, come the next year, skip 2 shows, come the third year. So you get sales for last year's new book this year as well. But gosh, it just would have been, and I still fingers crossed, it would have been so dang good to have this, especially like you said, on opening night where those 4 hours, it's only from 5 o'clock to 9 p.m. I sell more in those 4 hours than I do on the Thursday of Comic-Con, which is a 10-hour day. So I sell more in 4 hours. It's bonkers busy those first 4 hours. So Anyway, long story short, Brad, I've just made a real bucket of syrup for myself.
So I know I know what's going to be happening over at the Kellett household, starting in like July 11th, July 14th. It's going to be Dave Kellett just sitting by the window, staring up the street, waiting for somebody to make the turn and come down the street.
Just hoping. It's like my dog sitting by the window, hoping someone will say, "Hey, can we go for a walk?" Yeah. I'm exactly like a small dog with powerless to change their own fate. So on that note, I'm going to say hello, everybody, and welcome to ComicLab, the show about making comics
and making a living from comics. I'm Brad Geiger, the editor of the Webcomics Handbook on Substack and the creator of Evil Inc.
And I'm his friend Dave Kellett, still not on Substack, but thinking about it, cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon and co-director of the documentary Stripped.
That show just released today, as a matter of fact, and people are really responding strongly to it. Our Substack show.
That's great.
That's going to be a great show. And this week's Hour of Comics Advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/ComicLab. So Dave, let's talk comics.
Let's talk comics, my friend. And a huge reminder, if you remember, we're going for 500 for 50, which is I want to get 500 patrons for my 50th birthday. And we're getting really close. Brad, I'm so excited for it. So tell folks what to get when we get to 500.
When we get to 500 backers on Patreon, 500 paid backers, we will do 2 episodes of Drunk Comic Lab. Now, this is a tradition that goes back quite a bit. And to be honest with you,
you make it sound like it's an old Christmas tradition. Okay, kids, let's gather around the tree.
Well, we've done a couple of Drunk Comic Labs. They are some of our best shows because as the drinking commences, we start telling stories that we would be much too shy, much too smart to tell in public otherwise. In fact, this is why it's a Patreon exclusive, so we can limit the number of people that hear what we're about to say, because invariably we start talking tales out of school. And it started out as Drunk Comic Lab, just one. But what happens is after the first show, we've got such a head of steam after the first hour, we're like, let's do another one. And another drink gets poured, and we do the second one, Drunker Comic Lab, which is even more off the chains than the first one. So if we get to 500, and I want to get there before the end of August, because Dave and I are both going to be in San Diego for the NCS convention, the Rubin Week. If we can record this together out at the Rubin Week, I think it would be even. Could you imagine, Dave, you and I posting up at the hotel bar
it'll be
out
delightful
there with our microphones?
It'll be delightful. And honestly, I want people to know we get questions every week into the show, right? And Brad does a wonderful job of sorting them all. There's probably a half dozen that both Brad and I go, ooh, we're saving this question for Drunk Comic Lab because it's going to elicit such better responses when we've had a few beers than if we do it on a normal show. So join us over at patreon.com/ComicLab. You will get 300 plus episodes that you've never heard before of pro tips, which goes out exclusively to Patreon backers. You'll get access to the Discord server, which is an amazing resource for pros and pro-am cartoonists sharing best practices. And when we get to 500, you're going to get pro tip, or you're going to get the Drunk Comic Lab pro tip that goes out exclusively to Comic Lab backers. And I will say this. Here comes our first question over at patreon.com/ComicLab. And this comes in and says, Dear Brad and Dave, living an artist life is an uphill battle. You're always in the trenches hustling, and it can get very lonely, especially since conventions are not what they used to be. It can be intimidating to some, too, seeing good ideas they wish they thought of first, or art from their artistic heroes, making them want to toss their pen and paper into the trash. It can be easy to get discouraged. I'm curious to hear stories from either your life or others you know of times where you felt frustration and wanted to throw in the towel, and how you got through those feelings. Brad, what were those moments for you where you wanted to throw in the towel and start over? Or not start over, but give up, I mean.
Give up completely?
Yeah.
Listen, there's been a couple times. There's been a few times over the course of my life that I've really had to sit there and take a look at the man in the mirror and say, are you sure it's not time to start thinking about doing something else? Maybe this isn't really wrapped up. Maybe it isn't for you.
Yeah.
Maybe this isn't on your horizon. You know?
Yeah.
And the first time for me where I really hit that I was doing Greystone in as a comic strip for about 4.5 years. I've told the story before. I was at Toronto Comic Convention and I could not get anybody to stop and look at my stuff. And I kept hearing myself say and do my pitch. It's a comic strip about a comic strip starring a gargoyle. And I heard myself say that over and over again to the extent where I'm like, nobody understands what I'm saying. I am spouting gibberish. That's what this is gibberish. I created a concept that is a roadblock, right? It doesn't have inroads. It doesn't have a landing pad conceptually for my readers. This stinks.
Well, because you want an elevator pitch where when you say it, someone goes, hey. And I remember being next to Brad, and I can say this now, being next to Brad, where you would literally have people go, what? Like, say that again. What did you just say? And it was a beautiful concept once you were into it and you got into it. The strip was a great idea. It's just like Brad said, the pitch was a hard pitch to make. Yeah, it was dense. It was dense and opaque. And I sat there by the Sunday night of the show, really thinking maybe this was going to be the last time I did a comic convention, and maybe it was time for me to start thinking about doing something else. For me, this was not a long-lived situation. I literally once actually getting to the point where I thought, should I stop? Should I not do this anymore? That was actually very freeing, because once I said, maybe I should stop, that's when I allowed myself to think about other things. Right. So would you say that by thinking about the worst possible outcome, your brain and your soul were like, no, we're going to find a way out of this? Well, yeah. And since I had, in a sense, given up, and I put that in air quotes, since I'd given up on making Greystone in work, I could focus on making something else work. Right. Yeah. You gave yourself the freedom to innovate. Yeah. Yeah. And so, like Evil Inc., the idea of a corporation run by supervillains was it was a storyline in Greystone Inn. That was a Greystone Inn storyline. And I thought people really liked that. And on the plane home, I ended up writing the first 2 or 3 weeks of Evil Inc. strips, because all of a sudden, like, the handcuffs were off. Yeah. It's like, I don't have to try to find a way to make this thing work. I gave it a good try. It wasn't happening. And all of a sudden the floodgates opened, and Evil Inc. was born on that airplane coming back from Toronto Comic Con. But that was the easiest one to get over. That one took a couple hours. I've had a couple that took a lot longer. But what about you? What were the times, Dave, in your life where you faced that maybe I should just give up moment? Well, I can sort of isolate 3 different ones, and I'll give you the ballpark ones, the ballpark descriptions first, and then I'll go into them. Yeah. Number 1 was the first sort of decade of cartooning semi-professionally. It was a dislike of my own output, the art that I was seeing on the page versus what I was imagining in my head, right? Yeah. And that was coupled with professional jealousy of other web cartoonists and print cartoonists who I thought were hitting the brass ring in a way that I hoped that I could deserve, but maybe didn't, right? So that was number 1. Number 2 came in around 2009. I just felt like everything that Sheldon was at that point was not the completeness of what I could be as a cartoonist. And that's when I started Drive. That was sort of the breakthrough there. And then the third one was a couple years ago, and you remember it well, was I was just like, okay, I've done Sheldon for 25 years now. Is it time to end it? Like, am I kidding myself? And so each one of those had their own problems. I sort of muscled or depending on how you want to look at it, muddled my way through all 3 of them. But let's talk about the first one, because I think this is true for both of us. I felt tremendous jealousy of my peers and of the pros around me of what they were able to draw and what they were able to accomplish with their drawings professionally, like the books that they were getting, the awards that they were getting, the apparent levels of income that I thought that they were making, right?
Right.
And all of those were kind of soul killers for me as a cartoonist, because I wanted it so bad. Since third grade, I wanted to be a cartoonist. I can trace it to third grade, wanting to be a cartoonist. And all I wanted to grow up was to be Schultz or be Watterson in the newspaper. And that gate was already around the turn of the century closing on me. That gate was closing. But I looked at the work of like Watterson, my heroes, or even peers, but that were getting in print, like Get Fuzzy, which was such great art at the time. It was basically Garfield, but it was a beautifully drawn Garfield. And I was like, why can't I draw like that? And then I would see peers of mine, Penny Arcade or Kurtz, or literally name anybody. And I was like, why are they getting books and sales and Eisners and this and that? And I did the comparison game, which, by the way, is a great way to make yourself miserable. Did you have that, Brad, in a phase of your career where you looked around and you said, I hate where I am compared to everybody else in my career?
Yes. Yeah, listen, let's be honest. That still happens. It still happens.
It's true. That actually is true.
Happens.
Yes, that still happens.
Every time I am insane inside my skull when it comes to this stuff. Anytime somebody gets nominated for an award, it should be me. I don't care if it's Window Washer of the Year. That award in my brain should be going to Brad Geiger. I don't care what the award is. I deserve it.
Can I just say though, having driven in Brad's car and seeing the state of his windshield, he does not deserve that award. That is not an award that he should win.
That's all political. But
that's who you know. Meanwhile, 10,000 squished mosquitoes on his dashboard.
Yeah. But I still do that. But I'm in a better place now than I was in 2005. But in 2005, I was absolutely, anytime somebody got a book deal, somebody got an award, or somebody just, did back in those days, we had our own version of going viral, right? Yeah. When you did a really good comic and everybody was talking about it, and their website was getting tons of hits, and you could see it was the topic. Yeah. And when that would happen, I'd get so angry that it wasn't me. Right. So yeah, how did you, I got to imagine you dealt with it a lot more constructively than I did.
No, I didn't. I mean, there were years where it was a lot of like falling asleep at night and going, am I wasting my time? Right?
Yes.
Like, am I kidding myself that even though I want this really badly, that maybe I'm not good enough to do it? Clearly, audiences are responding to other stuff online.
Right.
And the way I powered through it was by going through it. You know, like that, what's that phrase? You can't go over it, can't go under it, got to go through it.
Got to go through it.
I just kept working. And that, honestly, that solved the art problem, because doing a decade's worth of work where I was doing one strip a day, I just got better. I still am not where I want to be artistically, but I got better in that decade. And so that fear kind of fell away, right? And then as I worked in those first, I don't know, like say 15 years, in fact, exactly 15 years, I started to put out books, and it started to become partial income, and then a majority of my income, and then it replaced my day job. And how can that not be validating, where you're like, all right, I guess it is working. And then things happened over the courses of the year where I like Eisner nominations. Those are nice. I'll never win an Eisner, but I got some nominations. Silver Rubin Award, won one of those. That was nice. Watterson emailed me one time to compliment me on a comic, and I was like, holy shit, that's the high point of my career. And so like over time, but also more than any of those externals, adulthood just brought me more satiation of my own self-worth. Like I worried less in the way that you do as you get older, where you just like yourself more. And I just started to like myself more as a cartoonist. And that was ultimately the biggest validating point, I think, was that I just like, I tried to stop comparing myself to others. Brad does too. We both still fail at it. But I don't need to have the same success as cartoonist X. Mine is just different. It's a different success, and that's okay. And a little bit more years tells you that my success does not need to be Brad's success. Brad's success does not need to be Kurtz's success. Kurtz's success does not need to be Penny Arcade's success. We can all have different forms of success, and that's okay.
That's one of the biggest things to realize, and it was a long time since until it hit me. But that there's different versions of success.
Yeah,
because so many times I wanted to be successful. But if you would have grabbed me by the shoulders at that time and said, "What does success mean?" I couldn't have told you, or at least I couldn't have really built a word picture that described what success was.
Right.
Success to me was like, that was a 5-year-old's conception of success. Success was, I'm the king of the world and I wear a crown and everything I say goes. Yeah. Right. That's success. But when I was starting my comic in the early 2000s, if you really would have pinned me down and said, explain, give a number. How much money? How much money do you think you should be making by the end of this year? What does that success look like? How many books sold? How many books created? Or is it not about those things? Is it about building an audience? Because let's face it, in 2005, if you would have said what was success look like, I couldn't have honestly said a income level because I wasn't making a lot of money on that, right? It would have been so. Although that was part of my conception of success was monetary, but I couldn't have honestly said, well, I expect to make X number of dollars by the end of the year. That would have been Fantasyland, right? So it would have been really useful in 2005 for somebody to pull me aside and say, "What does your success? What does Brad Geiger's success in 2005 actually look like?"
I can tell you what mine was. I know what mine was back then. Because like you, I had an immature, and I think this is the word, it's an immature idea of what success was. Mm-hmm. It's very much like that line in Corinthians, like when I was a child, I spoke as a child and I had childish desires, and then I became an adult and I put away the childish things. I was a kid, even in my 20s and 30s, who thought that success was, I'm going to get an Eisner, I'm going to get a Rubin, I'm going to have 2 assistant cartoonists, I'm going to have a big studio, I'm going to drive to my big studio every day. I thought my success was going to be what Schultz had. Or what I'm trying, Mort Walker had. I wanted 4 assistants. I wanted a mangaka system of like 4 assistants underneath me, right? And we were churning out books and products, and that's what I thought success was. And then I think in adulthood, I came to true adulthood. I came to realize in a more mature way that success was not awards, not some flamboyant extravagance of money coming my way, but success was getting another year of getting to be a cartoonist. That was success. Yes. That was success. And is it way more humble? Yes, absolutely. It's more humble. Is it infinitely satisfying to get to when you get to that point, both in terms of wanting that to be your desire and then achieving it? Yes, it's perfectly fine as a goal. That is my goal now, is just one more year as a cartoonist. And every year it's one more year. And that's fine. So, but I want to jump into it, to switch gears for a second. I want to jump into the latter moments where I wanted to throw in the towel, because they're also demonstrative of stages of an arts career. So in 2009, I was doing Sheldon. At that point, 2009, I was doing it probably 5 days a week. I think I had stopped doing 7 days a week. I was doing it 5 days a week, and I felt really unsatisfied that this didn't represent everything that I was as a cartoonist. I knew I had more or different kinds of comics that I wanted to do. I knew that I couldn't really write for Marvel or DC. That wasn't really my wheelhouse, right? And I didn't really want to write for an 80-year-old property, like, oh, hey, another story where Tony Stark gets drunk. Okay, great. Right. So I wanted to create my own stories that were long form. And I looked around and I said, you know what, I'm just going to do my own. And that's when I started Drive. So my idea of throwing in the towel in 2009 was starting something new. And Brad's Evil Inc. was actually instructive to me about that you can just start a new thing. And in fact, it's very rewarding to leave aside the original project and try something new. Yeah,
that's interesting. So So far, both of us have kind of given a very positive way to get through this.
Yeah.
I'm going to share with you one that I'm not so sure I advocate, although I'd be lying
like
through
drinking.
my teeth.
That's what I advocate. No, keep going.
No, thank goodness it wasn't that. But let's go forward chronologically again. You got us as far as 2009. I'll take us to 2012. And I had quit my day job at the Daily News, all right, with the intention of going full-time as a cartoonist.
Right.
I had been working in newspapers since 1991. I had been working at the Daily News specifically since, I think, 1998 is when I went over there, 98 or 99.
Yeah, okay.
So I was there for about 12 years. And towards the end, as the internet crested and it got to be more and more clear that newspapers were on their way out, I started focusing more and more on building my business so that when newspapers were no more, I could make the transition to being a full-time cartoonist. And I was obsessed with that goal.
Right.
I was obsessed with it.
Right.
And in 2012, basically, they made the announcement that they were going to cut one person from every department based on seniority. And even though I'd been there 12 years, I was the low person. And so I was going to get cut. My only choice was to take a buyout. So I took the buyout.
Right.
And I went full-time in 2012. If you remember 2013, which was just around the corner, that's when people started releasing ad blockers.
Yes.
For websites and for phones.
Yeah, that was my own terrible moment too. Yes.
Yeah. And at the time, ads was how we made a living.
It was.
And we were making great money through ads. It's part of the reason we were all comic strip artists was because you could do a comic strip every day, build this big archive, and now you get somebody going through your archive. They start building up ad revenue for you. You get a lot of those people. Even more, yep. Right? And so I was paying a lot of bills on ad revenue. And these ad blockers came, and every month that noose got a little bit tighter around my neck. And finally it got to the point where the writing was on the wall. And I was faced with, I may have to go back and get some kind of a day job. In fact, I started looking for jobs. What kind of a job would I be able to do that I could still try to keep this comics thing alive? And also be at that point, not a spring chicken. I wasn't 30 years old anymore. And I had a couple of kids. And what am I going to do? Right. And moreover, how am I going to tell people that I got to go back to a day job after being a full-time cartoonist for less than a year?
Right.
Now I'm faced with making the announcement,
and how painful that would be. Yeah.
The admission that I had failed. And again, I don't recommend this, but it made me angry. In fact, I was pissed. I was furious. And so I would spend, a few minutes on monster.com thinking, well, what could I do? But then I started looking at other things, and I realized I had a whole bunch of stuff I had written for webcomics.com.
Right.
You and me and Chris and Scott had done the How to Make Webcomics book a few years earlier, but I had the sequel to the book already written. It just needed to be put together. It just needed to come together in that time. And you remember, I actually felt I needed to go to each one of you guys and ask your permission to do the next book alone, because I felt like that might be seen as a betrayal. But of course, all of you were not only super supportive, you're like, fuck, we'll help with the Kickstarter. Yeah, we'll do this and we'll do that.
Well, also, the three of us realized that you damn near single-handedly did the first book. I mean,
I appreciate you saying that. But So that was the first place I turned. That's when I started looking at teaching because I wanted to have that safety net. So I started looking at teaching at Hushin School of Art and then eventually at University of the Arts. And that's when I started. That's when I stopped. That was the beginning of the end of me doing a comic strip because I saw, wait a minute. If there's going to be no more ad market, why am I doing a comic strip? Is that the best incarnation of Evil Inc. for the reader right now? Right. And if it's not, what is that? That's when Evil Inc. became a graphic novel. And that's when, by the way, instead of trying to fit this storytelling humor comic, which, by the way, storytelling humor comic, wonderful fit for a newspaper, horrible fit for the internet,
horrible, yeah.
That's when I gave myself more panels to do more story and then hit a punchline in the end. Instead of trying to go story, punch, I was doing a lot more story and then a punchline to hold them until the next time. All of a sudden, my writing got better. That came out of anger. Too, because that wasn't like, oh, gee, I bet you there's a better incarnation of evil. Like, no, it was you fuckers, you fucked me, and now I'm gonna fuck you back. If it's not gonna be a comic strip, it's gonna be a graphic novel. And I was ranting and raving. I was furious. You should have seen me in the studio pacing back and forth like a madman. Everything that I did in 2013 came out of first anger. And then what am I going to do about it? And I envision myself, and this is too much information, as a boxer in the ring getting pummeled. And I refuse to stop throwing punches. I'm being truthful with you. I refused to stop throwing punches. And I saw myself getting just creamed. And the only thing I could think is I will not stop throwing punches. So I threw a lot of punches in 2013. A lot of ideas that crumbled, a lot of ideas that took. And that's how I got through to 2014 when Patreon started. And then Patreon was a huge breakthrough for me in terms of what I was doing. And then I wouldn't actually start doing Not Safe for Work until I think it was 2016 down the road when I took another turn in my career. But in the meantime, the way I got through my throwing in the towel moment was absolute rage and anger. And I don't suggest it. You know how I always say that I've got a 25-year history in professional comics that was driven by spite? Yeah. This is the same thing. It was driven by rage.
Rage and spite. All right. So at this point, I'm going to need our editor, Matt, to put a little 1950s shopping music behind me when I say, hello, friends. Dave Kellett here from ComicLab Podcast. That's over at patreon.com/ComicLab. A reminder, friends, that Brad's personal metaphor of being in a ring and having to throw punches and living out your anger and spite as a way of powering through your artistic troubles is not necessarily an official recommendation of the ComicLab Podcast. We invite you to try to focus more on the joy of creativity, adding to the human experience, and making the world a better place. That's right, friends. Not all rage has to be the source of your creative endeavors, and so the Comic Lab Podcast officially doesn't endorse Brad's personal metaphor of tearing off the limbs of another fighter.
No, I don't even endorse it. There's got to be a healthier way, but I would be lying through my teeth if I said that I was calm in that moment. I was angry. Yeah.
Hey, listen,
the idea of going back to work.
I mean, and this is the sort of hidden truth behind a lot of these dark moments of our souls, is that both Brad and I, through a lot of these stages, and there's some that I haven't even mentioned, he hasn't even mentioned yet. Mm-hmm. All of them, you had to want to be a cartoonist more than most anything in your life. You know what I mean? Like there were shitty moments where both of us had to be like, I mean, I hate this. I hate going through it. I wish that I was at X plateau or doing X or Y or whatever it was. And you just had to want it really, really bad. You know, there's a metaphor that my wife often uses where a personal speaker will come in, or like an inspirational speaker will come into a room of students and say like, all right, looking out at 30 or 100 or 1,000 faces and say, only one of you will make it. A little bit. You kind of have to have the person inside you that says, I'm going to be that one. And come hell or high water, I'm going to be that one, right?
Yeah.
And because there's enough times in life where the world is going to shit on you, circumstances are going to shit on you, your own mental game is going to shit on you, and you have to say, I really, really want this in a beautiful way, but also in Brad's anger, rage-filled way. I really, really want this, and I'm going to be the one to make it.
Yeah, the Hulk is my spirit animal.
Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we're going to tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
When you do, you're going to get hours and hours of podcasts that we recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on ComicLab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, which is a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, we get it. No worries.
Yeah, listen, you can still support the show by rating us wherever you get your podcasts.
Just leave a 5-star review and a few kind words.
That, along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics.
It really came down to that. But yeah, that's why. And we talked about this not so long ago, 2-3 episodes back. We talked about when I get really uncomfortable when a speaker says, if you can dream it, you can do it. That's bullshit. I dream a lot of things.
I dream a lot of things, and I can't do them. Yeah. I would love to play me some Andre Segovia guitar. Can't do it. Not going to be able to do it. Yeah,
that's right. There's a lot of things I'd like, and I know I have limitations, and I know that is just not in the cards. That the world it might be against me in certain ways. There's 100. This whole "if you can dream it, you can do it" thing is unfair to people because it makes them feel, well, maybe I'm not just dreaming hard enough. But on the other side of that coin, the other side of what you and I are talking about, whether it's my rage or your quiet determination, it's persistence.
Yeah.
Really what we're talking about comes down to persistence.
Because like this question asker said, so much of what an art career is solitary. You have to be your own champion when the whole world doesn't know who you are yet, or doesn't know what the title of the comic strip is yet, or doesn't know what the graphic novel is that you're working on yet. You have to be the one saying, no, there's something here. And by God, I'm going to get it there if it's not fully there yet. A question for you, though, Brad. Right now, Brad Geiger, in this year, in this moment of cartooning, what would make you want to throw in the towel? Or is that phase of your cartooning gone, do you think?
I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I had a note here on a sticky note right here that had our next topic. And that's what I want to talk about. Because that's why I've been so uncomfortable this year, since January, because everything that's going on in social media and how that's receding and it's in a death spiral, it has me feeling very, very familiar feelings to 2013.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Especially that slow recession. I know I've used this metaphor. It's a weird metaphor, but forgive me. There was this painting of a clown with a noose around his neck, and the other end of the noose is tied to a tree, but it's a sapling, and he's watering the tree. Right?
Who is that? Is that a New Yorker? What is that?
I don't know I don't know where I saw it. It's just an image that stood with me for years.
That's a funny ass image. Okay, keep going.
It's amazing, right?
Yeah.
And he's watering the tree. That's what 2013 felt like, and that's what this year is feeling like. That it just creeps and creeps and creeps. It's like and that's why, not for nothing, I've been a little bit of a Substack cheerleader for the last couple episodes, because I can see results there, and I am ready to go wherever I find results at this point. But that's so. Have I outgrown it? Am I in a better place? No, I'm getting ready for some more rage over here. And also, not only that, but a portion of my professional work has to do with not safe for work. And we've talked about how MasterCard and Visa are putting restrictions that are making it harder and harder to do transactions that are not safe for work. Even if if it's completely above board, right? Even if it's there's no nobody getting hurt, they're still making that, and government agencies are going at that. So I can see, again, I'm taking a lot of punches. The noose is getting tighter. It feels like 2013 again, and I am going to have to turn green and fucking start figuring things out again. Did I outgrow it? No, it's happening right now, this very minute.
Yeah. For me, I mean, thankfully, I feel like I have outgrown my insecurities that I'll never be a good artist. I'm actually very happy. You know, there's always that's always qualified. Like, I know I can get better, but I'm actually pretty happy with what I'm producing. And I feel less jealousy of other professionals. That's still very present. And as much as I just said the True Award is another year of cartooning, every year I still pine for an Eisner. I'm never going to win one. But every year I pine for one. And every year I'd love to be nominated for a Reuben Award, the big one, the big Reuben Award, you know, the cartoonist of the year. I'm never going to be nominated. But,
we are going to get nominated.
So
one of these days it's coming.
But I will say this, like, I still... I feel a different kind of throwing in the towel, where now, you know, that line that Lin-Manuel wrote for Hamilton, where he says, "Why do you write like you're running out of time?" Yeah. And now I feel like my throw in the towel moment is not my quality, or is not the level of professionalism I got, or the level of income that I have. Now my concern is I'm not producing enough. I have like 4 more projects that I want to get out into the world. Yeah. And I feel like a failure for not being able yet to get them out into the world. You know what I mean? Like, I only have about 20 really solid years of professional life left. Maybe 30 if I'm lucky, knock on wood. And so I gotta get working. I gotta do more. You know what I mean? I'm kind of, at the moment, for the way my life is structured now, I'm doing as much as I can. But really, until the kids go off to college, there's only so much I can do, you know?
No, it's funny. I thought I thought I had my best chance in recent years of an Eisner nomination this year with Tales from the Drive. I thought if anything that I was going to do was going to get a Eisner nomination, with Danielle drawing, and I was very happy with the way the story turned out, and it being a Drive property, all those things together, I thought I really had a shot this year, and you know what? God damn it, they passed me over again.
I have come to peace with the fact that Drive will forever be ignored by the Eisners. And what's the sci-fi one with the rocket
Hugo.
ship? Hugo. And the Hugo.
You should have won a Hugo Award years ago. It's
because I don't walk in those circles. You know what I mean? A lot of life is you gotta go do the FaceTime and show up. And I don't go to the Hugo Awards, and I don't do the glad handing on it because I don't care really. And if I cared, I would go, and I don't care. It was not for me. Yeah. And so, long story short, though, is that do I still want awards? Of course I do. And do I want that validation? Of course I do. But my bigger concern now is I'm kind of throwing in the towel on the idea that I'll be able to produce everything I want in my life, and that's my current wrestling point. And that's kind of a different shade of a different answer than what the question asker is asking, but that's my current tea time of the soul right now, is trying to figure that question out.
Tea time of the soul?
Yeah. That's a Douglas Adams line, the long dark tea time of the soul.
I like that. Okay. So let's as we wind this topic up, do we have any advice? We just got done talking.
we just spent 40 minutes scribing about our own past. Yeah. Well, that's what they asked for, to be fair.
Because number one, it is persistence. But number two, there is a thread through both of our answers that the way we got through those moments was to actually consider throwing in the towel.
Yeah. Yes. Because that's exactly true. Because only in considering and truly giving myself the freedom to say in 2021 or 2022, I might end Sheldon. Only then, with the true freedom of being able to walk away from, did I say, you know what? No. I'm going to do it when I want to do it. And when the spark hits me, I will do a Sheldon. It just doesn't have to come out all the time. That's fine. They'll get what they get and they won't get upset. You know, it's like, it's fine. And the same is true with you, with like giving yourself the freedom to completely change your format, that's when it truly sparks. So yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
The freedom to truly change a thing is actually a powerful moment.
And also, I just want to say, throwing in the towel is an option. You're right. It is. Let's say that you do put a pause on it for a little while. I'm thinking of a hypothetical.
Okay.
Where somebody's like, this is not working. I've been at it for 5 years. I have 3 Patreon backers. I don't have any following on social media to speak of, right? A couple hundred. And it just doesn't feel like it's working for me. I think you should consider that, right? At least for a second, at least for a minute, or maybe for longer, maybe even stop for a little bit and go do something else. Because what I can also tell you is that once that reality hits, that you've come to a full stop, only then can you really put this whole thing in a perspective. Yeah. Maybe you should do something else. Maybe you should do something that's creative, but in a different way.
Right.
And if you decide that you want to come back to comics, it's going to be right there. It's going to be right there waiting for you. Like Dave said, one of the big things that you and I both did was give up on this idea that the comic has to be out there every day or every Tuesday, every Thursday, or whatever it was. And we said, and you said just now, Sheldon comes out when you've got a good Sheldon to put out, right?
Yeah.
When you gave yourself that, and that was, by the way, throwing in the towel on a production schedule that you had for yourself. When you gave yourself that freedom to finally did it, only then could you really put all of this in its proper perspective in your life.
Yeah. And another way of saying it, too, is that I also gave myself the permission to say Sheldon can be a platform for entirely different projects. So I just started doing the anatomy projects. And in the next year or two, I'm going to do the children's book that I've had on my docket forever. And that'll come out through Sheldon. And that's the same kind of freedom. But it's also the willingness to say, I will continue the course of being a cartoonist. It might just be down a different path, like Evil Link as a graphic novel, not as a comic strip. Or like Sheldon hosting Anatomy of Animals instead of doing Sheldon. That's all of that is fine. You're still at the drawing table. You're still taking all the things you've learned, but you've given yourself the freedom to go down a different path. So what's your one standing bit of advice for any cartoonist that wants to throw in the towel in year 1, in year 10, or year 20? Do you think it's just persistence and giving yourself an honest conversation of here's what it would look like to throw in the towel?
Yeah, I think if you get to the point where you feel like you got to throw that you might want to throw in the towel, I think you have to take that as an option. Yeah, I think you have to take it as an option and really, really sit with it. Yeah. Right. And then once you and I don't mean just in a pretend way. I mean, really, what would it look like if I was not doing this comic anymore? What else would I do? Maybe I would do nothing. Maybe I would play video games.
And maybe you're okay with that,
Yes, I'm not saying those are bad things.
No.
But only and frankly, in certain cases, not across the board. I would even say maybe stop for a week or two and see what that feels like.
Right. See whether it gives you the itches all over your skin that you got to get back to the drawing board, or whether you go, oh, this is actually kind of nice.
Yeah, exactly.
But I will say this, too, because I agree with Brad and I co-signed exactly what he just said. Yeah. I will say that my sense of it is that in life, one of the most painful things you could say to yourself is coulda, shoulda, woulda. Like, no, I could have been a cartoonist. No, I should have kept going, right? And if you've put in 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, you might be closer than you think to your breakout moment. Maybe, like Brad and I, what you might want to consider is just a new title, a new outlet, a different way of doing things, a different way of sharing it. It might be that the title that you've had in your mind since 10 years ago, maybe that's not the title to break through. But in the meantime, your artistic skills, your writing skills, your editorial skills have all improved in the last 7 years of your cartooning. Maybe that's a path, is that it's just time to change lanes.
And when you say title, you don't mean the name of the comic. You mean the comic.
No, I mean the title. Like I went from Sheldon for a while to Anatomy of Animals or Anatomy of Dinosaurs or Anatomy of Authors. Brad went from Greystone Inn to Evil Link. Exactly. Yeah. Thank you for correcting
not the words. No, Yeah, no, I agree with that. I agree with that 100%. And because here's the thing, we have to realize that you and I are one type of person. Like we always only wanted to be a cartoonist.
Right.
There was never an astronaut phase. There was never an author phase.
No.
There was only cartoonist. And a lot of the people listen, and by the way, that's not good. That's not bad. It just is.
Right.
A lot of people listening to the show are not that person. If they're being honest with themselves, they're not that person. That can only be one thing.
Right.
And maybe comics is just what they're doing right now. And because because I don't want to sound like you should just quit, but I've seen, in fact, I know people. I know a video game developer, a guy that made his own independent video game. He was struggling in comics, and he finally had to give himself the permission to say, okay, it's not going to be comics. To find out that he was really good at this other thing, and he became a really great independent video game designer, right? And he does basically the same thing. He's an independent as like you and me, but his medium is video games.
Right.
But he had to give himself that. And so that I'm not encouraging you to quit if you're listening, but I am saying that this thread that works between Dave and I both actually was acknowledging that maybe it was time, and only then could we get to the next thing. For us, it was another comic. For you, it might be something completely different.
Right.
You know what I mean?
It's funny because you reminded me of the specific psychological place that I was in when I started Drive in 2009. And I just want to take people there in that moment because I think it might be instructive.
Yeah.
I wanted to be a comic strip cartoonist in the newspaper my whole life. And I cannot emphasize enough how much self-identity was tied up in the fact that I was, by God, going to be a comic strip cartoonist, not just a cartoonist, a comic strip cartoonist. And I was going to be in newspapers, and that was going to be me. So in 2009, to have some sort of modicum of success, that had been my sole day job by that point for 2 years. In 2009, I said, is this all I want to be? Is there something different? To suddenly say, maybe I want to do a sci-fi graphic novel, something I had never considered before, and frankly didn't know how to do in 2009 when I started. You look at those first pages, which are pen and ink, not digital, and were not great. I was still trying to figure out how to write for a page versus a comic strip and draw for a page versus a comic strip. But I needed to expand what my self-definition of success was and my self-definition of what my cartooning was going to be. And like Brad, I found that to be a really transformational and helpful point in my career. Yeah.
It's so weird because on one hand, we're saying persistence. On the other hand, we're saying consider. At least taking a pause. Consider what it would look like. I get the feeling that part of why the question asker asked this question is they wanted a pep talk. And listen, we're good at pep talks too, but we're also kind of, this show is about realism and taking a realistic look on that. And for us to just tell you to keep plugging away and by golly, it's going to happen if you want it bad enough. The fact of the matter is that's not the case. That's not the case. And so if you are really thinking about throwing in the towel, I think you've got to consider it.
And
I think it's got to be a consideration.
To counter Brad's thought right there.
Yeah.
You do a little bit have to say with persistence, by God, you will make it work. This is such a nebulous, because I see 100% Brad's point and he'll about to see 100% my point. I had people tell me in explicit and concrete and accurate ways why Drive wasn't going to work, right?
Yeah.
And I had to, in the back of my mind, say, to hell with you. I am going to figure out how to make this work. And it took me a couple of years, but I figured it out. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I'm saying. You do a little bit have to say, I'm going to fight against... like what you were just saying was you got to consider that you might be wrong. Yes, that's true. But you also have to be able to say, no, damn it, I'm right. I'm on the right path. It's just time and effort are what's required here, not solidity of goal,
No, you are, and you're right. I 100% agree with you. I 100% agree with you. You are completely right. In fact, and by the way, I remember one of those guys who was telling you why Drive wasn't going to work.
Oh, Brett, ask me where he is now. Schadenfreude. Anyway,
no, but so it's one of those things. Listen, if we say, here's the only thing. There's two things going on here. Number one, I feel a little bit bad that we're giving two completely different answers, except for the fact that they are 100% both correct answers.
Yeah, they are. That's what's weird. Yes.
It's two things at the same time. And the only thing that would make me feel worse about this episode would be if we had told you bullshit Pollyanna, stick with it, it's going to work out. If you can dream it, you can do it. Because that's the only wrong answer to this whole topic. That's the only, the only thing that would make me feel worse about this episode if we had done that. And the only thing that would make me feel better about this episode is if we had more time, but we don't, because I've got to say, you've been listening to ComicLab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Oh, your hosts have been my friend Brad Geiger, the editor of webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Link at evilcomic.com.
And my good friend Dave Kellick, the co-director of the comics documentary Stripped, now 10 years old and a classic. And the cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com and Drive, the drive.comic.com. One day with one of those Hugo Awards. I absolutely feel it.
But you know what? Honestly, I want one. Don't get me wrong. I really want one. But also, I'm fine. My career is fine. I don't need awards. You know what I mean? Like, this is going back to the maturity. I shouldn't do this in the end credits, but like, it's fine. I love just being a cartoonist. That's reward enough. Across all of human history and the tens of billions of humans that have lived, I get to be a cartoonist and make a living doing that. Fucking, that's an award. I don't need to have an award on top of an award. Although I want one. So if you're not, if you're a judge, I do want one. I'm going to say the ComicLab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net. And this episode, which was just on one topic, by the way, this whole episode, we had a whole bunch of other stuff planned. Never mind.
We have 4 more topics.
Yeah. This episode was edited by Matt Woodard, a wonderful human being over at Woodsong Productions. He's at www.woodsong.media.
If you love ComicLab, and gosh darn it, we know that you do, you can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts. And thank you so much for continually, Dave, those 5-star reviews still come in on Spotify, and that's what's keeping us out there. And Spotify really is where we're finding a lot of our new community members, people that discover the show and come in and become part of the community. They're coming in through Spotify.
Yeah, and maybe, dare we put ComicLab up on Substack one of these days? We'll see. I don't know.
It's been something that's been on my mind, honest to goodness.
Well, and I will say, to finish this off for today, I'm going to say ComicLab is made possible by your support at patreon.com/ComicLab. So I will go ahead and say that twice. Get Brad and I a drunk Comic Lab together in San Diego, patreon.com/ComicLab.
There's got to be some kind of award for podcast, doesn't there? What's the podcast award? We should be aiming for one of those too.
The potties? What would the podcasting award be? I don't even.
I don't even know. I'm sure that everybody's got an award.
What would that? I'm gonna Google it. There's got to be something. Hold on. Let's see. This is that.
Like, I know there's the Webbies. Like, I never see the Webbies come across, but I can't. It's always corporations that give each other those awards.
There is an award called the Podcast Awards. Wink wonk. Oh, that's really clever.
Honest to God, that's it.
They spent all of 6 minutes in the cab working on that title. Yeah.
Can I guess, is the statuette a microphone?
No, it's a USB microphone. It's just a headset microphone from 1999. Brad, here's the thing. Would ComicLab ever win an award for anything? No, it wouldn't. Do we need it? Absolutely. Which is
Yes,
why we're
we
begging
do.
you, friends, to
Now, here's the
nominate us
deal.
for the Podcast Awards. One of the best named awards out there. Brad and I will
Yes.
say that publicly. A lot of people are too afraid to admit it. The Podcast Awards are a great name by a great organization.
But wait a minute. Forget the Podcast Awards. Write us in for a Hugo. It's the only way. It's the only way I'm ever going to get a Hugo. It's a write-in campaign for the Hugo Awards ComicLab podcast. They're sci-fi people. They're not. They're going to be confused that night anyway. We'll go up there. We'll get our award. We'll get out.
Way to throw us under the bus with the judges. They're sci-fi people. What else they got going on? Listen to Brad winning over the judges. What are they going to be doing? Smooching? They're sci-fi people. Come on. They're going to be nominated for a Hugo.
I was going to say they were all high, but I knew that was a step too far. So I went back to confusion. Oh, they're sci-fi people. They're all going to be high. They're going to be out there smoking banana peels. They're not going to know what's going on.
Smoking banana peels. Brad Geiger, aware of drug culture since 1976. There we go, everybody.